we going to be kicking things off with a mage on each team? We will find out. Gentlemen, take it away.
All right, Sours, let's see what compositions these guys actually do bring. This matchup could easily be a winner's final. Just two top dogs here. And we are going to see a mage on the side of Limit, and Trill's going to be flexing back on over to the Monk, and we've seen him play this to absolutely, he's phenomenal on that Monk. And two Monks on both teams, actually, important to note. The difference is going to be on the healers and a Warlock on one side, mage on the other.
Yeah, so of course we're going to see a lot of difference in, you know, the kind of DPS output that a Resto Druid can do, as well as the DPS output that a Holy Paladin can do. And you know, we're going to see that Mage Blackrock Hold shine. We've seen some pretty ridiculous times come out of Mage Blackrock Hold. We've seen some sub 17 and in that ballpark, where we've only seen those 20-minute times around that ballpark for the teams that aren't using that mage. You know, we're going to see how they compare on this first boss. Exciting to see from Limit is that this mage is playing Arcane. And this is something you don't normally see in NA. You would expect maybe a Fire Mage, definitely not a Frost Mage in an AoE dungeon. But Arcane is, you know, it's a very exciting pick, and I always love seeing that Arcane being run.
It can get the work done, for sure. There's no doubt about it. It's going to have that AoE toolkit, and it's also going to be able to pump out that single target damage, and it's going to be able to do the mage things that we expect in this dungeon. But let's take a look at Amalgam of Souls, the first boss inside of our dungeon here. And one of the main things is we're about to hit this 50% mark. Obviously, throughout this phase, you can see that the range kind of have to move about just a little bit, and the melee need to make sure that they don't stand in this cone. But these adds that are going to come out here are going to need to be focused on, because they both have these Blood Death Knight tanks. We expect to see the big Gore Fiends of grass, but do you expect either of these squads to try to leave one of them on the outside?
Yeah, so we'll see how they have to handle that. Of course, Method does have the Druid available to Entangling Root, and if Limit wants to keep a mob out, they're going to have to chain some slows onto it, maybe give it a grip, maybe give it another grip. And you know, once that's all taken care of, or you know, they can also opt to just simply kill all of the mobs. You know, you do see one slow ghost coming out of that blue square marker from them. Method NA on the same part. You know, Method NA is actually now passed up Limit's damage a little bit on this boss. You know, this is really neck and neck, and we're seeing how they handle this phase.
So one of the big reasons that we actually do see that come out, we wanted to draw your attention to it, actually leaving that one ad on the outside. Basically, Amalgam of Souls does nothing when these ads are out. He's not going to really be doing mechanics. He's just going to be taking damage and looking really cool with his scythe in the air. But as soon as the ads actually do get to him, he's going to do a massive amount of damage based on how many ads are up. That's why you need to make sure that you kill him. But if you leave one on the outside, he doesn't do it until that 15% mark. So you get some free damage. And this is an interesting strategy coming out from Limit. Did you see the trinkets that they just proc?
We're just using, that's a very fun trinket. We see some people use that Agrimar's trinket. You know, they are, of course, losing out a little bit of damage by wearing this tanking trinket, but these monks don't necessarily have the best defenses for handling it, but by simply slapping on that tank trinket, they can take a big hit like that and shrug it off and move on.
It's been a really important trinket as well in the theory crafting that's essentially been going on in the MDI. Both these teams going to be able to get past this first boss unscathed, and as you can see, they just invised right past that trash, something that we definitely do expect to see in this dungeon. So right now, they're all tied up, 0% as far as trash is concerned, 0 deaths, 1 boss down, but this is where this dungeon can get pretty scary.
This is basically where things are going to start spiraling out of control for one team or the other. You know, Method's got a big uphill battle to go against this bursting stack. You have to make sure that you don't forget that bursting affix is there once you get these stacks rolling. Limit does have, of course, the Paladin bop to handle it, as well as, you know, they can ice block it and deal with it in other ways. And of course, that Arcane Mage is going to make sure that things die at the same time so that stacks aren't being rolled.
And also, something that I want to note, obviously, Maximum on your screen right now, he is the best multi-classer in this guild, hands down. We all know that. But we got to put a spotlight on these other guys, because Trill, I've talked about it in so many tournaments, including PvP tournaments, phenomenal multi-classer. We've seen that out of him. He rocks melee cleaves. That is what he's doing in this current season, and he's so good at it. But also, he's going to be able to multi-class here, and now they're able to bring in this mage, they're able to bring in this arcane, so kind of becoming a theme of Limit is they don't have very limited comps.
Oh yeah, they're definitely, you know, pushing it to the limit here. We're seeing, you know, this first pull is going to look very similar, but then as soon as they get this Arcanist under control with that Death Knight control undead, you know, we're going to see this next pull happen all at once, and up to this first boss, it can still be very neck and neck, but where it really starts to go out of hand is right after the second boss in that big hallway.
The mage can do more damage per second than I have brain cells if this is pulled off correctly. But we have seen it be an issue. We're expecting 72 million. I don't even know if that's a lot of brain cells. 72 million brain cells?
Well, you know, they've definitely got very smooth brains on this team. I know Maximum's got one of the smoothest brains of all right? So they've got to make sure that they play very smooth and, you know, keep it clean. You know, right now it's about playing safe. They've got the power of this cheese. As long as they can execute it correctly and, you know, keep that train going one pool at a time and, you know, nail that execution, they'll do a really good job. You see, JB has died and he has to release and run back. So they have these bursting stacks going, 2 more deaths out of Method. You know, this pool is not looking good, where Limit is simply setting up to do a crazy pull.
And you really don't have much leeway when you know that, look, at the end of the day, Limit has the power of Arcane Blitz and Spell Steal on their side, so you know that they really, you can't afford any mistakes. You're hoping that they make a mistake because going into this, they're favored when they do have the mage, and you really do want to pull down this first win. I'm assuming right now, in this map pool, we've already seen, you can do some cheeky stuff with Warlocks, but now, let's see what our mage can do. Are they going to be able to pull off this pulled in the correct way? They want to go for just about everything here, and right out of the gates, there we go. Going to already be breaking that 20 million DPS mark. Now, just kind of hovering around 19, but they're doing a great job here.
As you see, that trash has been quite a struggle, but that Arcane Mage is just absolutely phenomenal. Does such insane damage with the power of those stacks. And maybe he's even refreshed his buff between pools. These mobs are going down, maybe not quite as slow. Something that's also cool that you can do when you implement this mage strat is the other DPS don't have to use offensive cooldowns when the mage is the one doing all the pumping, which will allow them to then use their cooldowns on the following pool, whereas the mage is, you know, in that downtime between those stacks.
And also in scenarios like this, it kind of allows the monks to, bursting though, going to chunk Maximum, but he stays up. But Grievous is going to be the worry right now of this healer, just slowing down for a second. Just gonna chill, take a quick little drink if they have to as well, but ultimately everybody is going to be okay.
Yeah, you know, these teams are still neck and neck, right? But that Arcane Mage is, you know, we saw just how scary it was on that pull, where Method struggled with it. They racked up 3 deaths on it, whereas the Arcane Mage simply deleted everything. We're going to move into the next boss, and we'll see its health drop rapidly.
And that was the thing to note as well, is Limit didn't necessarily go just crazy fast there, but what this allowed them to do was, obviously the mage did a bunch of damage, which made them go fast, but they had to stop. They had to rack up that Arcane Blitz. At the end of the day, what it allowed is speed and also just very clean. You're not scared of anything, and that is huge when we get over to this next boss, because that boss, we can talk about the mechanics a little bit right now, they get out of hand very quickly, Sours.
Oh yeah, so of course the second boss is going to be throwing boomerangs around, and if you stand with a friend at range, they can bounce and put a really tremendous bleed on 2 players. He'll also target 3 members of the group and charge them and put a fire trail on the ground, and just 2 ticks of that fire trail could be the end of your life. So it's important to position correctly so that you know that which direction to run out of the fire as fast as possible so it doesn't take all of your health.
Now, obviously, we see Method NA not needing to accumulate these mage stacks. They don't need to get this Arcane Blitz, which is what's allowing the mage to do bonkers damage. So they're going to go ahead. They're going to pull the boss. They're engaged with it right now. They have 1% lead on Trash, and now they're working through those mechanics that you already alluded to, Sours. And keep in mind, once again, this is a 23, so this is going to be one of the harder keys that we've seen today.
Of course, that 1% trash differential is because of this ad that they are using to spell steal stacks from, and so we see that Method is looking to be pulling ahead on the boss percentage, but of course Limit has not pulled the boss yet. We're going to see some bonkers damage coming out of this guy as soon as it goes. Here we go, boss at 100%. Watch that meter, guys. This is the power of spell steal. You know, we see the lasers coming out from Method. Meanwhile, the boss is being dominated by these guys over on Limit.
Quick maths, the mage goes Scree Dakaka Pop. Very easy to melt this down. A quick little ice block comes out there. You want to make sure that you pre-immune that mechanic. That's going to allow the mage to focus on exactly what the mage needs to do here, and that is nothing but damage, nothing but net. Ultimately going to break that 20 million threshold again. This is where we keep seeing that mage hit on the damage meter, and Ravencrest already down to under 20% health as casting this I-beam. Going to focus onto the mage. A little bit annoying here if you are the mage just trying to do bonkers damage. Going to actually just use that nice little arcane explosion there. Try to stay mobile as you do kite that little eye laser around, and actually going to go back onto the mage again. Kind of annoying.
Yes, and then of course there is a death out of Method NA. It is on Marvin, and there was a res, but he hasn't taken it. We'll see, or maybe he died again. That's really unfortunate when that happens. They're behind an incredible percentage on this pool. Now they're down to DPS. The boss is gonna die that much slower. It could potentially go into a second phase, which means more lasers and more death.
More lasers usually do result in more death. Definitely will agree there. And one of the things is obviously the mage team when we are in this dungeon. Oh no!
Oh, they get to get bouldered? That is something, with this first staircase, we did see a terrible boulder run in a previous tournament.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But, this pattern, first one is, of course, always left, right, left, right. So as long as you play smart, you'll never get hit by a boulder there, but you do have to watch out.
All right, yeah. So no comment. Moving on, looking at Method NA, they are still going to have that player down. They're up to 5 deaths. And like I said, the team that has the mage is usually in the spotlight in this dungeon because it's obviously a very flashy thing. The boulders, we do know, can actually cause a mage team to lose. That is one of the ways that a mage team has lost on this dungeon before. But the other thing is you just need a flawless run from Method NA to truly get past the advantage that we're going to have from this mage. And now the mage, they're going to pop Heroism here on this massive pull, a very difficult pull as well. After this, you can kind of get up to that bat phase a lot easier. And you can see the bursting going to come into play here. The monks, though, just shine at this moment.
So we see they do what's really scary about this hallway with the bursting stacks is the mobs in here have 3 different tiers of health, and so the first mobs die and apply a bunch of stacks, and the second set of mobs die and refresh and apply more stacks, and then lastly those third mobs die and then refresh those stacks again, and they keep on rolling. It's like Preheat has died to boulders, but only one this time. It is not a full team wipe to the boulders, but they were able to use that Agrimar's trinket to live through those bursting stacks, and using all their defensive cooldowns. And that's how you handle it.
Yeah, that is how you handle it. And they're going to have to rock on here, even in spite of that unfortunate circumstance on the staircase. And now they're just moving forward here. Limit at 75% on the trash. Method NA now going to go for that pool that we saw Limit invest their Heroism on. Heroism is going to be available to Method NA. How are they going to opt into using it? Another big pool going to go down. Leg sweep just going to catch all of these demons off guard. I trip you, demon! I trip you! And then they are going to just be able to melt them down. Big damage coming out from both Trill and Lip Monk, looking very good at this moment. And they still do have I believe they still do have this ad, right? I think they're just like, okay, we don't need to actually rack up these stacks right now. Let's just try to move through quickly. When we actually do get up to this next boss, that's when they're going to start doing it after this actual bat.
Yeah, it's that idea where the previous pool, it was the Arcane Mage's time to shine, and now they have both of those Windwalker Monks cooldowns available. And we saw Maximum ran up the staircase early to grab all of these bats. Because if you run up the staircase with the tank, they can cast sick bats, and then those mobs are going to ultra global you and kill you instantly.
That is a really important thing to note as well, because you're effectively right there. Instead of having to rack up cooldowns, and you said this a little bit earlier, but that is really seeing it in practice. Instead of having to rack up the Arcane Blitz, because you have all the cooldowns from the Monk, they're actually going to be able to put out together more damage than that Mage, and they're going to be healthy. They don't really have to worry about going down there. They can blanket those leg sweeps and before you even hit DR and ultimately just bring things down. It's a lot quicker. Now you're going to rack up the Arcane Blitz. You want to make sure that you go through this as cleanly as possible. The Monks already have invested their offensive cooldowns, and most likely they have their trinkets up now. So it's kind of this back and forth. It's like, okay, I'm going to kill it, you stay alive, your turn to kill it, I'm going to stay alive, and all of a sudden we find Limit in a relatively commanding position, but Method NA going to get this boss pool again a little bit earlier because they don't have to accumulate these Arcane Blitzes, but it's a less clean, right? So that's why they do have these 5 deaths. Will these boulders be the dirt on top of the coffin right now for Limit? That's a lot of seconds that it is going to detract from them.
Well, we're going to see a similar story, of course, the second boss here, where Method has engaged the boss first. They're doing a really admirable job keeping up with this mage strat, but of course that mage is just going to shred that boss's health, already down to 35%, whereas Method is at 60%, working through this boss normally. Once this boss is down, it's just one pull left in the dungeon. Windwalkers don't have to use any cooldowns here, and then as soon as they run up the staircase, you pop that SEF, start spinning around, and then that's how you win the dungeon.
That is exactly how they're going to need to do it. Now, just playing it nice and clean needs to be Limit. Getting out of those bad bird iguanos. And bats, actually. They all look the same to me. You know, I'm kind of bad with animal stars. But Limit looks like they're going to be able to get this one down, and now they're going to go for that trash bowl, and only one boss left. This is obviously a dungeon that their composition is tailored to, as we do see Smashbite just hanging out on 1% for a little bit there. Yeah. Now Grievous goes out.
We saw, of course, they're still using the Agromar trinket this whole dungeon. You know, that's dedication. You know, of course, the Windwalker's weakness is that it is a bit of a glass cannon. So by using that tank trinket, you know, you don't have to use a defensive, and then you can put on a DPS trinket for the following pool, and then you have your defenses available. Whereas if you weren't wearing a tank trinket like that, you may have had to expend those defensive abilities on the boss, which could be the end of your life on this pool.
Big ability that you have to look out for here is going to be the coup de grace, which I believe in French actually means, hey, don't get hit by the boulder. By the way, guys, on the staircase, they hurt. But we can see Method NA trucking along. They did have another death here as Smashbite is about to fall for them.
Yeah, and so, of course, they are just going to be cleaning up the trash. You know, these Windwalkers are doing insane damage in this AoE situation. We see one leg sweep go out. You know, we see Karma's popped. Mobs are casting spells. It appears they've even engaged the boss alongside the trash. They're being efficient. They're playing crazy. They're doing big pulls. Bursing goes out. You know, Paladin's got his wings going. You see everyone's health ping-ponging around, doing a good job. And now Method NA, you know, they're charging ahead. They're going to go up the staircase. We'll see if they opt to pull this trash into the boss, similarly to how Limit's done. You know, Limit's done this dungeon so good so far.
Very well rehearsed there. And yeah, you can see the monks, they basically spread all their abilities around. That's going to allow them to accumulate stacks. They put out those charges, those clones of themselves. And then when they actually start spinning around on the screen, like you see, they've accumulated so many of these stacks that it just increases the damage by an absurd amount. And that's why we do see those monks doing so much damage here. Now, I expect the Arcanist is probably going to get released pretty soon to try to build up a few stacks before the final form of this boss, the true demon, is released right now.
Yeah, we see a lot of teams will like to release this Arcanist once they've gotten the buff from the final boss, and then they can kill it with all the bonus damage and health that they get after this guy transforms. You know, Method has also pulled the trash into the boss. They're just a little bit behind it in, you know, percentage, and they're behind in deaths. You know, Limit has just got to play cleanly for the rest of the dungeon. If any of their members die to this first Shadow Bolt volley, he will be gone for the rest of the fight. We do see 3 Agromars and an Ice Block. 0 damage from that Shadow Bolt volley. Really clean. You know, these guys are looking healthy. They're about to get big, and they're about to start pumping.
And this is pretty much what you're saying. You know, cleanliness is really going to be important in this dungeon for them, because if you live, you have the cheese. You have that damage coming from the mage. So just pop the Agromars, make sure that you live, pop your immunities, make sure that you live, get this buff, and then just don't stand in bad stuff. Don't get put to sleep here. Don't get hit by laser beams. And want to note 2 things that are on your screen right now. The 99% is going to be because of the enslaved ads that these guys do have once they're released and they're taken down right now. They're going to build these arcane blitz stacks for that mage, but then they'll bring that down on both sides. Both teams will have 100%. Also, times on the bottom of your screen are going to be a little bit off. We're going to have the perfect updated times once this ends, but I know you noticed something on Method NA side.
You know, this is something that we talked about just a second ago, and it has happened. Of course, Dark has died on Method, and so he is out for the count for the rest of the fight. And even if they did have a battle res charge available, which they don't right now because they have used them for previous pulls in the dungeon, you know, once somebody dies at the start of this fight, and if you don't res them before that first volley goes out, you know, they're gone. But this is Limit's dungeon, really clean, beautifully executed. Not the fastest Blackrock hold we've seen, but they did it fast enough to take the win.
Yeah, we are going to get those exact times now that everything is getting settled, but like you mentioned, this is one of the worst timings you can really have for a death. If you die on this boss, it's almost similar to Odin. It's like it's a permadeath almost.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, we could obviously point to the immediate difference. Limit has the mage, Method NA does not. But I think it's worth also pointing out that even aside from that, Method definitely had some kind of careless deaths there. So that's something for the rest of the series we'll want to keep an eye on. So it's not just mage versus not having a mage. And when Method was playing, you know, and not getting those careless deaths, they were actually kind of catching up, as you kind of expect with that composition.
I really do think Method just lost that one. Yes, the mage was there, but even if the mage wasn't there, I feel like Method would have lost with, like you said, some sloppy pulls and things like that. And Limit, even outside of the mage, just you brought them up, had some really clean play, playing around those 2 monks, which does really seem to be kind of their bread and butter, where they feel the most comfortable. They're timing all those cooldowns really well. What's the scariest part about those monks? the fact that they're going to die at certain points. So they go in, they have that Agrimarsh trinket, a really nice strategy to see. And then that pull at the very end there, they save so much time on that last boss.
Yeah, you know, like whenever you can do two things together, like, you know, trash in a boss or trash in more trash, it's just so much more efficient. You know, we see teams avoiding big mobs whenever possible. Like we see, you know, scorpions being skipped. We see big mobs at the bottom of Moth Souls being skipped. You know, everything you can do to, you know, squeeze out that little bit of extra efficiency, and that's how you win the dungeon. And, you know, these guys just played that much more efficient than their opponents, and that's how they claim the win.
Yeah, for sure. It ended up being a situation where, as you said, the Windwalker monks were definitely working for them, and that hasn't always been the case throughout the entirety of these regional tournaments thus far. We really have seen Windwalker monks kind of being picked because they are so powerful at the moment, and they're maybe not necessarily what people are used to playing. But this is kind of refreshing to see from them. They brought these Windwalker monks, they brought the mage. They really played to the map, and it seems like they're playing to their strategy overall. Now, the good news for Method is they do have that Warlock, and as I feel like we kind of went over again and again last weekend, the Warlock is going to give you an edge in Arcway. I don't necessarily think it's anywhere near as powerful as the Mage and Blackrock Hold, but it is definitely an edge.
Yeah, it's an edge, and it's going to allow them to most likely lock that in. Is it as strong as the Mage? I would have to agree, no. But ultimately, Limit selected their composition for this map pool in particular. Not only that first map that was coming up, obviously it's a factor when you bring the Mage, but they have so many options. We already saw Trill. He was on that Rogue earlier because you're thinking about, okay, what skips do we have? Right. Where am I going to be getting out this Shuriken Storm so I can put the combo points into one place? Now he's on that Monk. He's on that Monk for a reason. And also, it's kind of hard to say with a player like Trill because of the amount that he is multi-classing. I would say it's probably his main. I still think that's really probably where he's the most impressive in my mind. And now they have that moving forward in this entire pool.
As you did mention, we did have a little bit of an issue there displaying the times, but do want to go ahead and just go over those. Again, it's fairly obvious as you were watching who won that particular match, but it is going to be Limit with a finishing time of 18:17, and then we did see Method NA obviously didn't finish on the stream. They were a little bit far behind there. Obviously, Dark did take that death on Dentalian Axe, so that obviously really prevents them finishing that from at least what we saw. Obviously, if we'd let them go over time, they would have gotten there. But yeah, clear win for Limit, and yeah, it's going to be a clear 1-0 for them. And I really like what you said, Rich. And Sours, when going into this, do you think the approach you should be taking in every situation is playing to your comfort, or just overall tailoring your strategy more towards the actual maps you're going to have to play?
Well, there's a lot to be said about playing comfort picks whenever possible. When you play a class maybe you're not as familiar with, you may not know when to use your defensives correctly. If you play Windwalker Monk all the time, or you play maybe Warlock or Mage all the time, you don't use cooldowns. Like, you don't think about using defensive. You just kind of use them instinctually. We do see, of course, Marv is playing alt Windwalker here, so he may not have the best times, of when to use all the abilities correctly. And of course, these guys on Limit side are some really high-end multi-class PvP players, right? And so they know the ins and outs of these classes. They know when to use defensives. We see them using, embracing tank trinkets. They're playing it safe and smart, and that's how they're winning it. They're just playing really, really good WoW.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing to kind of punctuate this sentence as we get ready for the break there is just there is a difference between a movement being a reflex versus having to take an extra half a second to think about something, and that's definitely what we're seeing with people playing on their mains. But no issue thus far for Limit. They are up in this series 1-0. Method NA going to have some ground to work up if they are going to tie this series. We'll see what happens when we get back from this break. No surprise, but with Limit up 1-0, we are heading to the Arcway. It is going to be Volcanic. Sours, scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not surprised at all, 10 being really surprised. Where do you land on this pick?
Well, taking, E-Man to Arcway, you think it's the kind of thing where if you pick Explosive against him, that might be kind of a mental game. But they do have the power of the Warlock in here. And, of course, always you get these players a little mixed up, of course. Mid on that, he is going to be spinning around. Of course, Marvin is on the Warlock. Marvin is a Boomkin on live, and he is here playing Affliction, of course, specifically for this dungeon. One can think with that control. And, of course, Top Cats is not I'm fired up. Don't want to get all these, but, there's all these players. These are the NA personalities. They're coming in here. They're showing off their stuff. And, this is their dungeon to flex in.
That was very informative. The answer I was looking for was 1, not surprised. Rich, 1 to 10, how surprised are you we're going to Arcway?
I don't do numbers.
Please, anybody else? No, I'm just kidding.
So without using numbers, I will say, wow.
Oh my God. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and hop into the game, though. These teams are ready. Obviously, Method is definitely looking to correct this. Get this tied, get this equalized, start playing to their strengths. And we are going to be heading to the Arcway, a map which definitely has some curves in which way you can go with it. Gentlemen, take it away.
Lots of curves and curvy demons. But at the end of the day, I will say, I think this very easily could be the winner's final. You look at these two teams, I think this could be the grand final. I think that these are two of the top teams in the region, and it's huge for whoever does come out on top, because then all of a sudden they still have that path in the upper portion of the bracket to get to the grand finals. Now this first pool going to be very indicative of what we see in this run.
So how you approach this first pool is a little bit different. I'm not quite sure what Limit's doing. They maybe just taking a little bit longer to get started, but E-Mangle's just going to take these mobs off to the side and then die and allow his team to sneak by, and then they're just going to res them back up. And it looks like we're going to see a lot of the same from Limit, but they have opted to run to the right, whereas Method has opted to run to the left. That's just the kind of style you see out of these first couple seconds in the dungeon.
Some people go right, some people go left. It's just how the cookie crumbles, but at the end of the day, we will see them progressing forward right now. Max now going to get a few of these rats alongside with these withered. And this is a potential big pool that they can get here as well.
Yeah, there's a really huge pool coming out of Method. They're going maybe all the way through this hallway and even down into the spiders even. No, it looks like they're just line of sighting. They're not that crazy, but this is a huge pool from these guys. We're going to see these Windwalkers start to go insane, and then that Warlock's going to catch up when all these mobs start dying. Limit is doing a much more conservative pool, a lot smaller out of these guys. If Method can pull this off, they will be well ahead of Limit. They are on the high, on the back foot. Limit has decided to go right, whereas Method is, of course, they're running that Warlock. It is optimal for them to head left and grab that buff as soon as possible.
Yeah, so you can see right now, they're trying to make sure that they do this pull cleanly, because everything is getting very scary at this point. The other ability that the Warlock is going to have is all the slows, and you could see just blanket silences attempting to come out, getting those stuns out, everything from Method NA. A very, very well-executed pull that's going to get them 31%. Limit still chugging along on 18% with this pack, still getting chewed into. Now, we've talked about the fact that the Warlock is very strong. There is an advantage with the Warlock. You already saw what it was with the Mage with Arcane Blitz. What is it that the Warlock is able to do?
Now, of course, as you like to say, that Warlock is going to enslave these demons, and once he does that, he'll gain a buff that he can cast on his friends, and that buff is going to give you a lot of haste and damage, and it's, you'll see whoever's got that buff from him is going to be on top of the meter. They're going to be the king of the jungle. We're likely to see it on Dark, as he is the big, strong Windwalker. And what's cool about Dark is actually a Limit player, and he's playing against his brethren, a full Limit team versus this Method team of all friends of miscellaneous origin. Of course, 2 deaths coming out of Method. We see none of the... What they're doing here is JB has ran off ahead, and it's time for the battle res. They are heading, of course, to our good friend Zakal.
Yeah, we've seen this skip quite a few times, and usually it is going to be the Druid that does pull this off, and you're able to just get past a huge amount of trash, and you're instantly all the way up at that boss. But the downside is the fact that you start off with a bunch of extra deaths. You already kind of had that one guaranteed death because of your tank at the beginning. Now you're going to pick up the rest of the squad, so they're going to have to work with that. They're instantly going to pop Heroism, and guys, we got to explain both of these fights to you right now. First, we did see on that right-hand side of your screen. Limit going to get that first pull. One of the big things to note, you can see running around on the screen right now into these puddles is going to be the Mage. The Mage, a very mobile caster, so he's able to be at range, keep that uptime on the boss, and just stacking that buff.
Yeah, of course, it's going to give him a lot of cast speed, and he's going to be doing a ton of damage with all that additional haste. And Method has pulled the trash into Zakal with them, and they've cleaved it on down. You see Dark has gotten that buff. He is carrying that meter. We do see a death out of Marv. You know, they are going to be able to battle res him and bring him back into this fight. You know, these two bosses are going to be going down at quite different rates, of course. With Corsorax, the haste buff is going to be giving you a ton of damage, but you do see the Windwalkers doing tons of damage here because similarly to how Method has taken a couple of trash into Zakal, Limit took a ton of trash into Corsorax, and that's why those Windwalkers on top, because they did all of that AoE on the start and just killed everything in that room.
Instantly, too, we do see the healer on the side of Limit, able to get the Mage right on out. That's basically a trap that you get stuck into that the boss is going to throw out. Got to run over and click on it, and that's how you get your buddy out a dodge. Able to do just that. Now, got to kind of deal with that suck that goes on, and now the Mage going to move back around, get these buffs, get that big damage out. It's interesting, though, to see, we mentioned that the Warlock is going to dictate which path Method NA really does want to take based off of the buff and things like that. Now the heroism does come into play. What do you think the real upsides are for, and downsides potentially, for both of these teams using heroism on these two very, very, very different bosses?
So, of course, Limit is likely to head to Zakal last, and then maybe they'll have heroism, or, you know, maybe you want to call it Bloodlust or Ancient Hysteria or Netherwinds. You know, there's all sorts of flavors to get you that full buff. You know, of course, for Method, they are going to be using a drum because they do not have the Mage available to give them that full lust. And we'll have to see, you know, this isn't a 3 lust dungeon, right? They're only going to have 2 opportunities to use it, and Limit used it to kill a ton more trash percentage than Method has, but Method is ahead. They have done significantly more trash in order to get over here, and also they have a bit more of a boss rush afterwards, where they've cleared a lot of trash at the second boss, whereas there's a lot of trash standing between Limit and their next boss encounter.
Definitely. I think we need to just kind of go back, though, and remember Method has that very convincing pull at the beginning. That's how they start off this dungeon, and most of the deaths, if you're just tuning in right now, all but one of those was planned. The 5 deaths, basically, one is going to be that first death that comes in. That's the tank. That's how you get past the big bad ooey gooeys that make more ooey gooeys, and it's like a bad Jell-O commercial. They get past that by letting the one tank go down. Then they're going to do the skip that fully utilizes the Druid, where they just kind of hop up, get that full res going. So basically, that's the only death that was not on purpose, is on the side of Method NA, because Limit also has their death because of that initial ooey gooey death.
Yeah, both teams, of course, opted out of that slime fiesta at the start of the dungeon. We have seen it claim the lives of many teams in the tournament. It's very easy to rack up the body count on that pool. Of course, Method has cleared all the small spiders in this second boss room, so they're able to grab it all up. They've got one trash ad, and they're just going to do a lot more AoE. They're going to pull further ahead on trash count, but, you know, and then there is that. They're going to be able to engage the second boss much sooner than Limit will be able to engage their second boss.
Now Tira, it's a complicated name. You may be asking whether or not the spider is a he or a she, but I can tell you it's she actually invited me to her webbing.
Well, I hope it was, you know, a really, you know, not too sticky of an occasion. I hope you didn't spill anything on yourself.
Oh, of course not. Of course not. We're good friends. We used to be web designers together, but now we are going to see these mechanics coming out. These are some new tricks coming out of Naltira. What exactly are the mechanics that these guys need to be worrying about?
So Naltira is going to choose 2 members of this group, and he's going to lash them together. We'd like to see the Warlock place a gate or a Warlock portal out, so see him instantly portal out there. So that way the Windwalkers can stay on the boss full time and not lose any DPS uptime, as well as, you know, by popping it so quickly for the Warlock, he doesn't have to be running and losing damage. You know, Limit is doing some big pulls. Something tricky about these worms on the way over to the boss that Limit is headed to is that unless you line of sight them, they are going to keep casting at you regardless, so you'll need to either use like Gorfiends or simply stand around a corner to get them gripped up. Of course, 50% health from Method. You know, they're doing a really clean job at this boss.
Yeah, Method right now trying to be the Widowmakers, fighting against now Tira. Limit, though, completely different path. We talked about Ivajar a little bit earlier and how there are all these different routes that the teams could actually take. This is really the dungeon where it gets completely out of control. You have a lot of different options. Obviously, the thing that does happen when we are on this tournament realm, everything that can be similar is going to be similar. So if you're in Karazhan, the actual opera event's going to be the same. Here, the center is going to be open every single time. So you got to keep that in mind. Still, though, you do have these options. And Limit, they are moving on over to their next boss right now. It looks like now Tira, though, going to go down first for Method NA. But this could be a little bit deceiving, even though Limit has not pulled their second boss yet. They have to go a much different route.
Yeah, you know, there's, you know, the trash percentage in between these bosses. You know, they're about to be one boss ahead. They are just now engaging Ivanir. There's a couple little mechanics they have to watch out for on this guy. He will, of course, link 3 members of the group together and then draw a nice big pizza pie on the sky. Oh, I'm sorry, on the ground. And then they're going to make sure that you don't stand in that pizza pie, otherwise it will shred through your health pool very quickly.
Pizza pie, you will die. Remember that. Lock that into your head. This is one pizza you don't want to have delivered to your face. But Limit has accrued few more deaths here. I didn't actually see how they did get those other 2 deaths, but those little deaths that you do get, it kind of gives Method even more cushion. Their strategy is a little bit risky. They're assuming that they're going to have very optimal pathing and it's going to save them over the 25 seconds of time. So now as Limit gets more and more deaths, it's going to do just that. And instantly Method is going to be able to get to this boss that we already saw. We already saw Limit engage, and once again, we do expect it's probably going to be the Warlock here who's going to run around and try to get those buffs.
Yeah, we see, you know, a very similar pull as to what Limit did earlier, but now they have the power, of course, of that Warlock enslaved demon buff, and so they burn through that trash incredibly quickly. Now the boss is at 83%, and all of the trash in the room is dead. They still have some haste bubbles that you can hang out and stand in to gain additional haste and do more damage to the boss, and that Warlock is just going to take a stroll around the room and walk through all those puddles, and maybe they can get that achievement for gathering all those puddles up. That'd be nice to see. And, you know, that's how he's going to be doing all this damage here.
The real all-stars, though, I will say, for picking up those actual buffs are either going to be BM Hunters, Fire Mages. Those are really the kind of the strong classes to do it. As a Warlock, it's a little bit annoying. You're decent at it. You can kind of refresh dots and things of the like. But for the most part, you're not really going to be able to drain and things like that. So you do lose some uptime. The Fire Mage doesn't really lose uptime. If they need to, they can be casting Scorch and things of the like. So they still are going to be able to do decent damage. Yes, they lose a little bit. BM Hunters lose absolutely nothing. But there are no BM Hunters here. I wonder why.
Yeah, I know. It's really unfortunate. You know, I'm, as a BM Hunter myself, I quite love, you know, I really enjoy the haste buff on this boss. You know, having that haste for the additional speed on your cast, you know, as a Warlock, maybe it helps your dots. You might drain faster, put out spells faster. You know, that's a really good feeling when you're just, you know, spamming out those globals, doing tons of damage. We see, you know, Limited has got just 10% left on Ivanir, and they've got a long run over to Naltira. And, you know, Limit is about to finish their 3rd boss, and, you know, just a couple trash pools remain between them and the boss that Limit is just about to kill now. Yeah,
exactly. And it's important to note, I mean, Method NA's pick, we alluded to the fact that it is going to be strong for the Warlock. But it's small oversight. This is a strong one for having the Resto Druid. And there are a lot of places where the Resto Druid will shine. It's kind of, for the most part, Holy Pally really has taken the cake, if you will, in the healing department. But Resto Druid kind of right behind it. In certain scenarios, it is going to have those moments of greatness. Definitely does have one here. Corstalax going to fall on the side of Method NA. And now they are going to move about, and they are going to keep that buff rolling. Warlock still enslaving that demon.
You know, so there's got a couple more trash pools left. They're pulling one of these ghosts by itself. You know, of course, killing a single mob is very slow. You know, it's rather inefficient, but these guys are dangerous. So it's important to, you know, if you're seeing them, use that corner to line of sight the Torment cast. That way they are not getting stacks. That way they don't have to worry about kicking. You know, they can kill it nice and easily and then move in. We'll see how big they decide to take the next couple rooms. If you're feeling brave, you can pull everything. Of course, Limit did do it in 2 pulls. We'll see, you know, Method is quite in the lead right now, so they don't have to go that crazy. You know, Limit's got a couple, you know, they're about to go pull some spiders. And, you know, hopefully they don't have any Spider-Men here. You know, we wouldn't want them to get punished, or, you know, they might get envenomed.
Yeah, that is, yeah. That's definitely something that could happen there. But it's kind of just one of those opportunities for Method to say, okay, we're kind of just chilling at this point. If they just play everything fine, like they don't have to take a risk at this point. There's just no reason to take any risks. Just go about doing your dungeon, fill up that bar, make sure that you get all the trash that you need to do, and they have a few opportunities here right now, and you can see this is a relatively clean way to do it. They still do go big. They line of sight all of these ads, Gorfiend's Grasp, get them all in. That's going to be right into a leg sweep. Let's see if they have anything to finish it up. They don't even need to, because you know what the best kick is? You know what the best control is? Death. And they're going to be able to deal that to these ads. They got a few more up. They're going to take care of them right now. They're going to try to kick all of those nether spikes if they can, just to make sure that they do play it as safe as possible. Now, we didn't get to focus as much on our pal right here that they are about to engage on the side of Method NA. Talked about the pizzas. How exactly, though, will these mechanics play out for Method?
So, Method has got a similar comp where they're running a double melee and a single range. And so they're just we see these teams like to take these, 3 lines out to the side and drop them. Of course, they have opted to engage these 2 anomalies with the boss, so you do have to watch out for these cutter beams that they're going to shoot out. They will kill you quite quickly. And of course, when these mobs hit 50% and again at very low health, they will cast a spell that needs to be kicked. Otherwise, they'll heal back up to full. They're also dropping crystals that do tons of damage to the players. Luckily, they have no deaths accumulated here really cleanly into Ivanir. Of course, every now and then he will teleport near to his portal and start to channel a spell, which you need to kick as quickly as possible. Otherwise, he's going to be doing an increasing amount of damage.
I will say, those ads that they pulled with Ivanir, I think are kind of underrated, just how scary they really can be. So you do have to think about those mechanics. You do really need to be focusing on them. Of course, Limit is still going to be working on Naltira at 5 deaths now, 50% down. They got 1 battle res to work with. Method NA did use heroism here on this boss, and they still do have their battle res to work with as well.
Yeah, so for Naltira, it's a smooth sailing for them. We do see a lot of paladins go after this guy and do the same skip that Resto Druids do, but it will cost them 1 additional death to do that mass res with a paladin. You will need to Invis Potion, Speed Potion, as well as then pile on yourself at the end of the run. And these bosses are at similar health, but of course, this is the final boss that Method has to kill in order to engage the final boss in the dungeon, whereas this is only the 3rd boss for Limit. They're a full boss behind.
Yeah, and it's a boss that takes a while to get to, too. So it is one of those situations where Limit has quite an uphill battle to go for, and they're almost counting on Method right now to choke. There's nothing else to it. I think you gotta hope that Method chokes at this point. And look, now they're gonna have 2 deaths coming in. And look away for a second. That is just not something that can happen on the side of Limit. They are going to be all the way up to 8 deaths. So Method NA, they do have that one little hiccup. They have 1 death that they don't aim for, but besides that, all of these deaths were planned. 8 deaths on the side of Limit, only 1 planned, and I'm expecting that they don't go for that cheeky little skip. That's going to be so many deaths at this point, and all of a sudden, it's looking like Method NA may be able to get the full screen going here in their second map, and you're starting to see, okay, these teams in this pool have a catered strategy. 1 was for the first map, and we knew that it was going to be Method who could lock in this map for the second. They probably practiced it considering the fact that they have the Warlock. Warlocks love to hang out here with all of their demonic pals, but the question is, Limit, when they go to the 3rd map, what's going to happen? But let's see if Method NA can close this out here to extend it to that point in the first place.
Yeah, we see just how scary it is once you have team members hit the floor for Limit. The boss is going down incredibly slowly now, and they've lost their final DPS. It's just a healer and a tank versus the world, whereas Limit is just going to do a couple more big trash pulls. We see a lot of mobs here, and now they've got a lot of things that need to be kicked. There's some single target abilities coming out of this trash. They got the Arcane Bayonet, it's going to go off, and there's big explosions coming out of these shades. There's a lot of trash here that could very easily go south and kill them, but they have such a big lead right now. This is, they've just got to play safe for the rest of the dungeon. Don't do anything silly. Have a good time, and enjoy this ride to their victory here in the second match.
All right, this second map definitely being difficult for Limit. We're going to see the full screen. Yikes, now Method NA is very close to finding their victory on their map pick. trying to get to that last boss right now. And we talk about how this composition has just been so phenomenal for them. They need 6% more trash before they do get to this final boss. How's the final boss going to play out for a composition like this, Sours?
No, it's going to be... Oh, JB's down. You got to watch out for these mobs. They're gonna. It looks like he died almost instantly. They are not going to opt to battle res him. He is going to have quite a run back here. So these guys have to be careful. You know, if they got to make sure that you see a leg sweep out there. We see a second leg sweep coming out. These mobs are dying now, so they should be able to clean this up nice and cleanly, but that is something you have to watch out for. Deaths can set you back as an incredible amount of time. And since they killed Ivanir last, in the event of a full team wipe, they have an incredibly long run back to get to Vandross.
For sure. That is going to be a little bit of a pain, but you can see already he is going to be back into the fray. Another ability that they really do have that they could use is they could do the Warlock Summon, and lucky for them, they got a little bit of cushion here at this point, Sours. They've definitely taken a solid lead. As you can see, they are the only team that we are looking at currently on our screen, and now they are going to engage that final boss. Let's talk about these mechanics. You got to jump. What else you got to do?
So, you know, it's very similar to some of the trash we see earlier in the dungeon. He's going to drop crystals all over the floor, and if you stand next to them, they're going to explode, and they are going to kill you. You know, they have also this Warlock companion. You have to be careful with him because sometimes he can do funny things when the boss transitions. But as long as they play it safe and, you know, make sure you kick Accelerating Blast on Vandross because Vandross is casting this Accelerating Blast on the tank, and each cast will make him do it that a little bit harder. It's not that scary, especially if you're a Blood DK. And of course, we see now these force bombs going off, very similar to Imperator Margok of last expansion. Just have to run against it, you know, watch your health, and you be careful. As long as you have your head on a swivel, none of these crystals are going to come out from behind you and gank you, and then you should be fine, and you won't take any unneeded deaths.
And now the main thing that we're going to see is this actual transition as they get pushed to a random place on the map, and they got to go for that long run back. You talk about these crystals that they don't want to hit. They're going to have to be dealing with that, and they're also going to find some adds along the way. Yeah,
so of course the adds on the final run back are incredibly dangerous to the melee. So we're going to want to make sure that E-Man or band name is going to grip them to the side, or maybe they'll cast an Entangling Rune on them so that they don't engage them. We see a Paralyze out on the Chaos Bringer. Vandross is going to transition them very soon at 50%. They opted to actually stop DPS when that Force Bomb went off. Sometimes that Force Bomb will do bad things to you when that transition happens, but luckily no deaths, very clean. There's a nice run back now. Got to be very good.
Oh, Limit back on Naltira, and Trill's dead. 11 deaths on the side of Limit, as we do see Method NA trucking along, just going for a dream cruise. And I will say, I really, really like what they did with that demon. I know, as playing this as a Warlock quite a bit, if you just leave that enslaved, like you said, it can do some fluky things that you don't want to be messing with, especially when you're in this tournament setting. So it is really nice to just drop that enslaved, say, here, demon, I send you back to whence you came, and then ultimately just getting that locked up in the in cap. It's going to be left in that CC. They're going to be able to get back here as long as they do run at a good speed. Can re-enslave it if they want to, can re-in cap it if they want to. See, it literally, the timing is so perfect there, and it looks like they lock it up into a fear. Then the enslaved demon comes back, and haha, once again, we fight on the same side, demon, and now they're going to sink all of that massive DPS into Vandross, and they are seconds away from closing this one out.
Yeah, they've got their friend. He was waiting here for them, and now they're just going to have 40% left on this boss, and they're going to do some quick running around, just got to dodge the crystals. Of course, Limit ended up doing a full wipe after they lost those 3 DPS to their first Naltira kill before coming back and killing it a second time. A full almost 10 minutes slower than Method. You know, a really clean dungeon out of these guys. But this is something that is not the first time we've seen this happen to Limit even today, whereas earlier when they were taken to Eye of Ashara, it was definitely the optimal counter pick against their team composition. And it's the same story here in the Arcway. That Warlock versus the Mage, Arcway, you know, this was the map pick for Method to take them to.
I think both of these teams are phenomenal, and I'm going to say one thing about Limit right now. I think that they're going to be this team that on certain maps they're just not going to look very good, and on other maps they're going to look lights out. And I think that's because they were one of the teams that has managed to keep secrets the best, has talked the least amount of smack, and I think a large portion of that is them actually very intelligently charting out their course and figuring out which maps they can pick in each pool to ensure their victory. I think Method NA, on the other hand, with a phenomenal win there, is going to be the type of team that just is going to perform very well on pretty much every single map. I feel like their practice was very different.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what that practice regimen overall looks like, especially when we get to the global portion of this. We can talk to some of these teams and really kind of dig deep on how they're practicing. But I think both of these first two maps are kind of what we expected.
Yeah.
This is, Arcway is definitely a map where if you haven't practiced it a lot, if maybe you're not running that Warlock that has synergy with the map, you're going to fall behind a little bit. And I kind of felt like by the end, Limit was just kind of like, we'll get him in map 3. And map 3 is definitely the most interesting part of the 23s here in the upper bracket, because in this map pool, there's some really interesting maps that I think a lot of teams are not practicing a ton of. Cathedral, Seat of the Triumvirate. We are looking at, I believe, Halls of Valor. One more name escapes me at the moment. Oh, no, it's Lower Karazhan. So definitely some ways you can go with this. You could go to Lower Karazhan, which is something a lot of teams have experience with because of the way this tournament is set up. You could go to Halls of Valor. So I'm very interested to see where we go on map 3.
So this is going to sound a little bit blunt, but it's one of those things where if you are Limit, why on earth would you practice that map? This is one of those maps where you can say, okay, whatever, I'm not even going to look at this key. I'm just going to let it sit in my bag. I'm going to go grab a new one, because at the end of the day, they know how this map pool is going to play out, and they can have that more targeted regimen, especially when you talk about, hey, look, they know that they're going to go to that map first. They lock in that mage, and now they're going to have that play when they get into map number 3. But this is very much, as we move through this tournament, kind of seeing the different practice styles and determining which one really is the best, because I feel like these are two of the best teams that we have in NA, and they're fire and ice as far as practice is concerned.
Now, we did say going into this that the Warlock is an advantage, but it's not necessarily an advantage to the degree that a Mage and Blackrock Hold is. But we did see right out of the gate, Method NA coming out with a very ambitious pull there. And out of them, 31% of the total trash they actually had to clear. Sours, what did you think of this pull? Why go with this pull?
This is like, it's the same thing as always, right? These mobs all have very similar health, and they've got this crazy double Warlock or the double Windwalker comp. They just grab it all together, and the secret, the best defense is simply to reduce all of the opponent's health to 0 while keeping yours from hitting 0. And so by using those leg sweeps to keep them stunned and using all of those cooldowns to do incredible burst AoE damage, they are able to successfully take these mobs' health to 0 while remaining nice and healthy themselves.
And the blankets are so good there, those blanket stuns, that you can actually see JB's going to get nice and greedy. He's hanging out in cap form, so he's kind of a global away from even healing, but he's not too scared there. And you can see he allows his teammates to dip just a little bit. He's going to prioritize that damage, and that's a very good thing to see, and that's one of the times that they really do shine as a team. And you can see Method NA, when they allow JB to be greedy as well, they really just smoked Limit in this map.
Yeah, again, we shouted out JB earlier. I want to shout him out again. This is a guy who's shown incredible versatility on this Resto Druid. He's not just, look, his job is to heal, but he's not just sitting there in the back always healing. Like, when he has a chance to get into the action, he's getting into the thick of it, and he's really proving to be a very valuable asset for this Method team. And that poll just shows how ambitious you can get when you really know a map, when you've practiced it a ton. A lot of teams may look at that poll and go like, oh, we don't necessarily want to mess with this, but clearly Method had been trying this. They do understand what's going on there.
I think one thing to note, though, is it's a double-edged sword. JB is very good at it, but when you are playing that Resto Druid, you always do have to get out. You have to get back into form before you can start getting those heals out again. That's one of the nice things about having a Holy Paladin. When you are doing damage, when you're in those damage scenarios, you're just one click away from starting to get the team healed up again.
Yeah, certainly that's something that you have to manage, that brinksmanship. Again, you have to understand your roles and responsibilities in any given moment. And JB thus far looking absolutely stellar. Now, tie series, Limit versus Method. The first two maps felt a little bit telegraphed, but we are going to go to that third one. We're going to see what the pick is. We are going to see what Limit has in store for us. Will they be able to win, or will Method continue the victory trail? We will find out on the other side of this break. Welcome back. Another tie series on our hands. We are going to be going to game number 3. Now it is going to be Lower Karazhan with the Grievous affix. So Lower Karazhan, obviously something teams are preparing for as they kind of look over the format of this tournament and what they have to play. Normally in that third spot, though, you would be seeing Necrotic instead of Grievous. Sour, are you expecting this to throw a bunch of wrench in the plan for Method?
So this is the kind of affix that's really good to see. So of course, Lower Karazhan is a map with a pre-assigned affix, and so maybe you don't practice it with that Grievous, and so maybe it might catch you off guard when you least expect it.
Yeah, sure. And, obviously there are other ways you can go if you're trying to go for, I guess, a safer approach. Grievous is not necessarily the end of the world, but it is certainly something you have to pay more attention to than we would say maybe Volcanic.
Scary on Morose.
Sure.
Like there are definitely moments where Grievous is going to be a factor as with any affix, but I think that this is where we're going to start to see how much did Limit really have certain pocket dungeons. We know that this is a dungeon in the past that we've seen certain teams really try to flex on, and there can be kind of scary moments in the dungeon regardless of how well rehearsed you are.
Yeah, certainly. In some of this trash we have seen, you can't slow, you can't necessarily CC, so this has been an issue for some of the teams in the prior weekends. But wasting no more time, let's get into it. We have to decide who is going to advance between these two powerhouse North American teams, Limit, Method NA. Game 3.
How important is that first map win going to be? How important was it that they had the mage in the favorable scenario? How important was it that the counter pick came in with the Warlock? How important is it that Limit gets to pick the final map in this series? We're going to find out right now. And I feel like we haven't really mentioned it today. Obviously, this is going to be our 4th week here. But once you lock in a class, you are locked into that class for the entire series. All 3 dungeons, whether it's 2 dungeons or 3 dungeons, the entire series, you're locked into that class, but not that spec. So that's why we are seeing these comps come out like this. That's why we're not necessarily seeing the mage switch to the warlock, but now this first pull, they can get pretty large here. Another thing that we really do see the groups like to do is run down and get that event started.
Yeah, so of course it's always great to get that RP started. Jace is using a invisibility potion in order to get there. It is of course the Skagly drink of Legion, whereas JB can simply get into cat form and take a waltz on over there. And then, or looks like maybe even Method has decided not to do that. They have sent JB ahead, but instead of doing the mass res, they have opted to pull all of the trash and then kill it together while that RP is going off. We'll see how Limit approaches this pull. Looks like to be very similar. Why rack up those deaths and use that mass res when you can simply pull all this trash together and kill it while this RP is going off, and then you can simply walk out onto the stage, engage the boss, and get going.
And small thing to note, you will see that both of these Death Knights are going to have a little buddy floating around, and that is going to be one of the most efficient things you can do when you are running this particular composition, when you are running that Blood Death Knight as a tank. It's a very inefficient mob to grab because it's by itself, so if you do actually just enslave it, you're going to actually have or control undead it. You are going to have that additional perk of having a little buddy, and at the same time, you don't have to do an inefficient trash pull. So keep that in mind as we do move forward here, and now we are going to find out what the Opera event is. I think we already know.
It should
it's the
just
same every time.
Yes, the Beautiful Beast event, where we'll see now a variation, of course. Which mini-boss do these guys decide to kill first? And something also with that ghost that they pull with them is it's very hard to drag mobs like that around with you, and by using the Death Knight Control Undead, you can bring it wherever you want and release it and kill it, and it'll make stacking it much simpler. Of course, both teams opting to kill Mist Cauldrons first, and then you see Limit is heading on to Bubblet, and we'll see where Method decides to go for their second mini-boss.
It actually looks like they are going to do the same as well, and an important thing to note is how these actually die. You're not just going to be cleaving everything, Sours.
That's right. Once you kill one of these guys, it's going to heal all of the friends back up to full. So you don't want to be doing needless AoE. You just want to focus as much single target as possible into one of the bosses. Limit is pulling ahead and ahead, killing these guys just slightly faster than Method is able to. But of course, there is a lot of things coming up, and pull is very common after this boss, and a missed kick there could be the end of the dungeon.
Yeah, like you said, Limit is pulling ahead, but the really crazy thing is this next pull. I feel like this next pull usually make or break this key. In this particular Karazhan, that next pull can just be everything. Usually the teams that say that they've rehearsed it the most, that is where they try to make their time, but we have also seen that go wrong. Firelands, portals, things of the like can really just send a team's plan straight to the ground, getting burned up in flames. But as you can see, Coggleston going to be the last one remaining. for both of these squads. Limit just a little bit ahead, but Method NA starting to pump out some serious damage here. But Sours, what is it about this order? Why do we see teams doing this order? This seems to be the most common order that we've seen. What are teams trying to accomplish by killing things in this pattern?
Well, you see there's a lot of real estate that both of these teams have to deal with. You want to kill these mobs to eliminate the fire that's around the room, and then you want to kill that broom so he's not chasing you around and disorienting you. And then, you know, just clean up that last guy, and then you've got a nice clean room. You know, that fire is very dangerous on the floor, and then that way, you know, you don't have to worry about where you stand as much. You can simply take the boss easy, play safe, and play smart. And, you know, Max is on low health, and now he's dead. It appears that, I don't know quite what he's decided to do there for Limit. Method is, you know, doing something a little bit different. Where have these teams gone off to?
Yeah, this is a little bit scary, actually, going down for Maximus. Now going to be moving on back here with the group. I guess they're just going to go for a completely different path now. And you just saw that Grievous stack up. But was that an intentional death?
Maybe, like, who knows at this point, right? So these guys have chosen, they've opted to do a completely different route through this dungeon than Method has. Method has gone down below that stage and been very clean. Limit lost a couple of people there, and now they're pulling some trash right here in front of Moros, as well as in the kitchen. There's a ton of trash coming together. Woo! What is happening on this Limit screen? There is huge trash everywhere.
This was their pick. This was their pick. So this could be their strategy that they do have planned, and look at the amount of damage that their mage has been able to get out. They pull everything alongside those blueberries in Moros's room, and they are getting sufficient damage out as we see Method NA going for that more standard pull. It's a big pull with a lot of risk. They already do accomplish that 40%, and now they're going to be dealing with those ushers, and this is just a very interesting strategy coming out from Limit here. Do you think there's anything cheeky with this composition that they can pull off on Moros? I know you're a hunter player. I know everybody loves to be a hunter on this fight in particular because you don't actually have to use the traps that are given to you. But do you think that there's anything special that Limit could be doing that causes them to go for this boss first?
Well, of course, what Jack always loves to talk about on this boss is that Holy Paladin and what he's able to do with the Moros Garrote. Perhaps that's why they opted for this Grievous third affix. Method has a lot less tools available to get that Garrote off of their team, whereas Jeeth is able to cheese a lot more of those stacks using a cheeky bubble and, you know, dispelling it off of his friends and doing all the above. And then, well, that's perhaps why they've come here first.
That's the nice thing. It's not even cheeky, right? You don't even have to be cheeky. All you have to do is press the bubble. It's pretty easy to get rid of a very scary thing. I mean, we've seen groups have to use quite a lot just to deal with that Garrote. I remember that Garrote before it actually did get nerfed, but now Method NA is going to be in a situation where they actually lose 2 on their way to Maiden. They're doing the more standard pulls. Now they are going to be just 1 behind Limit as far as deaths are concerned, but you got to do some weird geometry, all of the above to figure out what is the path that Limit has in store. What trash are they planning to pull? Now working on Moros. You can see they still have a few of these dinner guests that they do have to deal with, but Moros getting chunked pretty hard.
Yeah, simple geometry for Method here. You know, they lost both JB as well as Mid on that trash, and they opted to res the Windwalker as opposed to the healer. They knew they didn't need healing to clear the rest of the trash, so by bringing that Windwalker back to life, they're able to kill it that much faster. That way, they can engage Maiden, where Moros is on 24% for Limit. Everyone's looking nice and healthy. All 3 of their deaths were perhaps those intentional deaths that we saw out of them earlier in the dungeon, really cleanly from them on here with Moros.
Limit's getting spicy. We want to see what exactly is brewing on their side. What is their special recipe to success? Soon it will all be revealed, folks, but let's talk about what's going on in Method NA's portion of the woods. They have already pulled Maiden. As you can see, everybody's going to run out. They're going to move that consecration effect to the outside. That is going to grow. It's going to get bigger, bigger, and bigger, and they're going to use that to actually get themselves out of the repentance, so then they can pop out. Maiden's going to put on a shield. They need to break that shield really quick, or it is going to be bad news bears.
That's right. So this big repentance is going to put a stun on every player that requires taking damage in order to break it. JB has died, and of course they did use that battle res just on the last pull to keep Mid alive. So there's Grievous building up.
Sheesh.
There's dots on people. You know, they've got to find a way to stabilize their health. Otherwise, you know, they're gonna be losing more members, and that could be a wipe, which could set them back a considerable amount in this dungeon.
Yeah, getting that Grievous off is definitely going to be a problem there. There are a few things that are going to be able to get a 5 stack off. when you are kind of that monk, it's like, what are you going to do? Are you just going to sit there and cast on yourself and try to heal yourself back up? Not going to work. So this is looking a little bit grim. They still do have 3 DPS up. I mean, we see that monk hanging on for quite some time here. Will the 2 DPS that are still up be able to get this 10% down? It would save them a very, very, very large amount of time if it is something that is possible.
So the fear is actually not even going to be the Grievous, but they're going to have to break this shield with just 2 DPS alive. If Maiden gets this shield
the Grievous is going to do it, right?
Yes, so even with the Grievous, if they hadn't even busted through that shield, the boss would have killed them anyway. It's just up now to the tank for band name for Emangle here to finish off his 5% by himself. He should be able to do it. And of course, they've lost a ton of time as a result of these deaths. Limit is just cleaning up trash. We saw a spider pool coming out of Europe. You know, this is something very interesting. Not a lot of people opt to go into the spider wing. We'll see where they go from here.
So did they have to kill any of the ads that actually do Firelands portals or any of that, or they completely surpass it and they just going to go for spiders and horses and things of the like?
They've, you know, there's no lions or bears here, but they have, you know, oh my, they've changed their route considerably and they've gone a completely different way. The scary Firelands portals that could end your run, you know, why pull them if you don't have to? Method has, of course, killed this boss, so they are able to release. The rest of Emangle's team is going to be very, very far away from him. Hopefully they've cleared enough trash that he's able to meet them back up somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, that is a bad scenario for Method, but they try to take those lemons and turn them into lemonade. I think they do a relatively decent job of that. Now they're going to be moving on in here, and we are going to see a big pool coming out. You're just going to pull all of those little phantoms that are trying to eat their suppers and the blueberries, get them down, but Midnight already going to be engaged here by Limit.
Yeah, Limit have cleared all of the trash in this room earlier. You know, they're so far ahead. This is their 3rd pick. You know, this route is really, really cleanly done by them. The Midnight on 50%. It's nice to see that the damage isn't going too crazy. Normally you expect to see Windwalkers and Fire Mages doing more damage to this. That's because if you save your cooldowns, right here you see Combustion has been popped by preheat here. So now if they can do enough damage to Attumen, they will be able to one-cycle him and he will not jump back on his horse, and then that makes the boss significantly faster.
And this could be what they were trying to do with the pathing as well, because all of a sudden they put themselves in a scenario where they do have the ability to get that massive amount of damage out. They move their cooldowns in a certain way. You can see that mage is going to just be pumping at the moment, and that one phase can save them so much time, but they do need to make up all of the trash that they have skipped, and I believe their last boss is going to be Maiden.
Yeah, so they just have a little bit more, you know, there's a lot of trash on the way to Maiden. They should have no problem at all heading over there. The full boss ahead, of course, Method is clearing up all of these, the trash in front of Moros, or they have Moros actually engaged. There's axes spinning everywhere. Grievous is ticking up. JB's got to make sure he can stabilize the group. You know, it's very dangerous there. You've got to make sure you watch out for the swords. You know, all sorts of things can go wrong for Method here, and Limit is looking really clean so far.
And as you mentioned, for the side of Limit, when they were on Moreau's, bubbles, things like that were going to be their strategy to just deal with Garrote. When you do have JB on that Resto Druid, this is going to be one of those times that the Resto Druid is going to be a little bit more difficult to heal up with. Unlike the skips that we saw them able to do in the last dungeon, this is going to be one of the places where it does seem like Holy Paladin is going to be that beacon of holy light for your squad.
It's like right now you see Limit, and this is a route that you don't see very often taken by teams here in Lower Karazhan. Where in the world have they wandered off to in this big wild maze? Well, they're simply going to walk right up here, and now they're back at the balcony. They're actually, look, boom, they're already at Maiden. This is an incredible route from these guys. They know the dungeon like the back of their hand. Really, really incredible out of it.
So the thing is that route's there, right? Some people may know that the route's there, some people may not. It is a route that is there, but there isn't enough trash for them to close things out. They're able to get right back to Maiden of Virtue. So, but after this, they're going to need to run somewhere else and take down some trash. I'm just curious what those trash pools are. Well, what is going to be the most efficient trash pool for this team? Now, obviously, we know the mechanics of Maiden. We just saw them go down. The less of these bubbles that they can deal with, the more time that they are going to be able to grab over Method NA. We saw that Method NA kind of was hanging on to a prayer there at the end. They saw their DPS go down. They get an additional bubble phase because they have that lack of DPS. And then with that additional phase, we see it is just ultimately going to be the tank that brings that down. So what exactly will happen here for Limit, we will find out now.
You know, there is a lot of trash left for them to kill. They haven't cleared anything in the in the area right outside of the stage, as well as in the room outside of the hallway for Maiden. So there's tons of trash that they can clean up relatively safely. There are a couple of mobs out there who have a pretty dangerous Shadow Bolt volley that you want to avoid at all costs. But Limit, with a route as clean as this, as clever as this, I expect that they've got that 19%, the remaining, in their pocket. They just have to wander around and find it, and then, they're look at them here. 40% on Maiden, looking really clean. Method is looking really dangerous. They've lost Marvin. They're doing a huge trash pool. They've cleaned it up. They're just eating food and recovering. Got the res going out, and then they can engage Atumen. But they do have kill count, of course, whereas Limit needs to find a kill count after this boss.
Exactly. So for the side of Method NA, they are also going to have an additional half a minute. They're going to have those additional 30 seconds that they have against them. Limit should be able to get Maiden of Virtue down ahead of Method NA getting down this boss. But let's see how they actually do play it. On this side of Limit, we saw, okay, they're not going to invest too much damage. The second that the true threat pops out, that's when they pop their cooldowns. They only one phase that horse is something that we don't see all of the time when Ottoman actually does fall down off his high horse. But they were able to giddy up, grab themselves quite a few seconds, and now you can see before Ottoman even does hop on down, they are able to take down their boss. What is this pool going to be? And you can see Death Knight Wraith walking so fast right now. Gonna just be grabbing as much as possible, and it looks like it's gonna end up being a cheeky little circle right back to his squad. Will this be enough percentage here? This is looking quite well rehearsed.
A lot of patience out of the rest of his team, allowing Max to get all of the threat. Nobody's on any damage to rip it off. They've got all these mobs stacked up. He's run off around the corner. He's got AMS pop. Everything's dying so incredibly fast. 90% of kill count has climbed up to. There's a lot of mobs else. 92, 99. They're missing just 1%. There's 30 seconds between these two teams, and they just need, looks like, one single trash mob to clean the thing.
Yeah, unfortunately while this match was looking like it was fairly close to being determined, there was an issue for Method on Maiden of Virtue. Unfortunately with the players, we're going to have a chance to look at them in the replay, but we are going to have to remake this one, so yeah, you obviously hate to see that. That's something that we have experienced that is not super popular, but it is a matter of making sure that the players have that opportunity to play in a setting that honors the spirit of a competitive tournament like this.
You hate to see it, but ultimately it will be coming in right now, and I think the main thing that we just got to talk about is this limit pathing. It's really interesting. Now we're going to get a chance to look at it again, and I'm excited to see what actually did happen.
Sure, we can actually go ahead and take a look at that right now. Let's go ahead and take a look at the bug. We do have the replay there, so you can see on Maiden of Virtue, there were some issues for Method.
Looks like, quite what's going on. They're doing their best here. It's nice in slow motion. Everyone's got the debuff. Some Grievous is out. Drain Soul, the Repentance goes, and then it looks like it doesn't clear. JB looks like he got meleeed by the boss somehow.
I think it's because we see that their tank's still in the rep, so the threat just goes to the
she's obviously not supposed to melee there. That is the core of the issue with the bug. So.
It's because of the Repentance too. The Repentance doesn't get broken, so then just hits the target that's not affected by the Repentance. And the only person that looked like they got released was JB. Turn around, punch the kitty in the face. Bye-bye. So yeah, that's definitely a remake.
Traditionally, Medivh is supposed to be the one that cheats and carries in, but this time around it was a Maiden of Virtue, unfortunately. So that is a bug, and it is going to force the remake on this one. But again, it is a matter of making sure that these teams have situations to perform where they're not running into bugs or things that are not intended to happen. So what we did see there, though, I think we got a pretty good idea of what both teams were looking to accomplish, how they were looking to do so. Moros is the second boss, Sours. Is that something you're super familiar with as a strategy when going through that dungeon?
Well, it boils down to lust timing. Is like, where do you want to use the second lust? A lot of teams will, of course, opt to use that lust over on Moros, but if you don't think you need it, maybe you can go to him. You've lusted the first boss. You can just simply kill him and move on to the rest of it. Of course, they have the Paladin available to handle those bleed mechanics. It's really just, how do you want to run through the dungeon? The way they had their kill route planned, it definitely seemed like that was the call.
Yeah, and for sure, as we mentioned during that match, Limit is the one who chose that map, so wouldn't be surprised. We saw Method last week, actually. They kind of had a different strategy for how they wanted to approach that particular dungeon, so curious to see, although it did look like even with the issues that Method was having, they were actually putting up a fairly good time there.
Yeah, I mean, so there are a lot of different options that you have here, too. That's the main thing to think about. Less timing is going to be very important. I think that the one thing that was interesting is I didn't expect to see those deaths actually need to come out on the side of Limit for them to achieve that. So I'm excited to get to watch that again, get some insight into that. I think we saw a little bit more of a traditional pool coming out on the side of Method, but they do it very well. The question is it going to be enough to beat this incredible pathing that Limit has placed together?
Yeah, and that is kind of interesting now, is now both teams are kind of aware of what the other is doing. So I do kind of even wonder if, mind gaming as we, are... Obviously, we're giving the players a couple minutes before we hop back in. Does that affect the way this is run? If you can kind of, being like, hey, someone I know is watching that match and they kind of told me what they were doing. It's also super interesting to me that the two Method teams from NA and EU aren't even approaching it the same way. Obviously, we saw Method EU doing it a totally different way.
Yeah, so, they're not going to change too much between these two dungeons, but they have now had a nice warm-up in here, so they'll be able to come at it again cleanly, and they should be able to, both teams, we expect to see them go much faster now that they've just gone through most of this dungeon. And so, even with that bug on Maiden, it was incredibly close, as they, went from 3 DPS to 2 to 1 to 0, and, that setback, they were still super, super close. So we'll see how they do, if they do it cleanly with no bugs, and maybe this could actually be Method's game.
Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned going into this map, this is a map that teams have been practicing for, right? Like, obviously, the affix, the third affix is a little bit different, traditionally necrotic as opposed to Grievous, but, I mean, this is a map that everyone is familiar with, right? This is not one of those curveball picks.
Definitely not anymore. I think that there was a time, obviously, when it did get added, when that first patch got added, that there were some curveballs, and also Morose used to be just the worst. It really was. It was very difficult to deal with, especially with how the Growth actually did work. I believe, didn't it get something like an 80% or a 90% damage nerf alongside Cathedral of Eternal Night?
Yeah, it got, a lot of these abilities in here got hit pretty hard. There's a couple that slipped through the cracks, but Morose used to absolutely shred teams, and then he got hit pretty hard, and so now he doesn't hit players quite as hard.
Yeah, he used to hit for a lot, Morose.
Yeah.
Rich, this is a pretty rough time.
I didn't expect the remake. I didn't prepare my puns. I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I popped into Twitch chat earlier, and I wanted to say that everyone is very high on you, and they super like what you're bringing and all the comedy you do. So I don't want you to feel stunted by this one not working out. I want you to keep fighting the good fight. Don't worry, Chad. I delivered your message to him.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the kind words.
Yeah, for sure. Rich, good job, buddy. Yeah, no, but as we were saying, even as Method NA was kind of falling one at a time to Maiden of Virtue, they looked very strong in this, and as we were actually coming out of the match, like, it really seemed like they were in a position to actually go ahead and take it even with that setback. But we are getting word now that we are ready to hop back into the match. So again, this is a remake of map number 3, obviously due to a bug we had with Maiden of Virtue that affected Method. So we're going to see how this goes on the second tilt around now that both teams are warmed up, now that they're both ready to actually get in there and have had a go at it already. I think, being able to say you went through the whole map essentially certainly makes you a little bit more prepared. So once more with feeling, Game 3, Method NA versus Limit. Lower Karazhan, take 2.
All right, Sours, let's return to Karazhan. Ready for this one. I almost just fell off my chair. Now we are ready to get into the action. We are going to obviously see the same compositions come out on each side. Instantly, these guys just grabbing up that undead, getting it enslaved. We already talked. Try to be efficient here. And we know that their healers are going to try to run down, get this RP started. Do you expect anything to change, or are we going to see, in the purest of purest replays, just come out, pathing be the same for both of these sides?
We do, of course, hope that we see a lot cleaner dungeons out of both of these teams. There were a couple sloppy deaths here and there that set both teams back, and as long as they can clean up those pools and get everything that much nicer, that we should see a little bit faster times out of both of these guys. Neither of them were approaching on some of the insane times we saw out of Europe here in Lower Karazhan, but they did, they were doing a really admirable job. This got a couple of trash here and there. Just got to make sure that you get all the stuns off, you get all of your kicks, make sure that everyone stays nice and healthy, and should be another good, really good close race.
You mentioned a few little slip-ups that come in on both sides. Definitely not a dungeon that was done perfectly, even with Limit, with it being their map pick. Do you think that either side had a little bit more slop? Do you think one was a little bit more on the slop monger side, or do you think both of these teams were very even throughout the entirety of the dungeon?
Well, you know, something that Limit's route was really cool, but when they were running through that long hallway up into Maiden, that's a lot of time they were spent simply running around, that they weren't actively engaged with any trash. Method's much more traditional around here in the dungeon means that they're in combat a lot more, and so they're not wasting as much time running around like Limit did. And so we'll see if, you know, that was actually the intended route. It looks very intended from Limit last time. Maybe they'll do it a little bit faster, perhaps maybe with some speed potions, who knows.
Those little movements you don't think about, right? With movements, you're like, oh, they're just walking. You don't think about the time that's actually racking up. That's why we talk about things on the other end, on the flip side of Karazhan, like when you actually have Curator, you want to be moving him towards the door. You want to make sure you're on the horn when you're actually on Maw of Souls. Every single second that you're walking is a second that is working against you. We've already seen these guys do the boss. We know that they like to take down the same targets first, but the main thing that you need to really have in your mind, as we are going to see which pathings that these teams choose as soon as this boss goes down, is which truly is more efficient. How much can you prioritize having Lust up on a given boss compared to just being always dealing damage, always keeping uptime on trash? And we're going to find that out depending on which team does win here, unless Limit for some reason does switch up which strategy they go with, which path they go with, because on top of everything you said, they also accumulated an extra 3 deaths, which is another 15 seconds on their clock.
Yeah, so the boss is looking a lot tighter out of both of these teams last time, whereas Limit went quite faster last time. Method, maybe they've gotten a couple more procs. They're actually the ones pulling ahead this time on boss damage. You know, so that's just the difference that, you know, that reset makes. They've got that first attempt under their belt. They're feeling good. They know what to do. Maybe you didn't quite use cooldowns quite like that as you wanted to the first time, but now you know exactly how this key is going to go down, so they're feeling a lot more comfortable. Method is already looking a lot better.
Yeah, Warlock's definitely going to be pumping here, going to be able to get out at just that little bit extra damage. On the other side, though, you got to say the damage is really impressive. We can see Trill just taking this boss to Trillville at the moment, just shining on that damage meter. They're pretty much neck and neck. It's going to be about 20%, and that's not a very big 20%, because you do have these several mini bosses that are essentially there at the given moment. So they're all going to have these smaller health pools, as you can see. Ultimately, it is going to stay within that 20% range. Limit now cleaning that up. How big of a pool will Method be able to pull off here? We know that they tend to go for that more traditional pool, going to be moving around here. Will they go all the way down to those actual mobs that do cast Firelands portals?
So they did last time, and last time they did it really perfectly, so hopefully they can pull it off again. If one of those Firelands portals goes off, it could spell the end of their run. Looks like Max has died. The Method is doing a very similar thing to last time, where they've got 3 deaths now on the clock. They've released back to the start of the dungeon, and they're going to head on around. They're going to head right back over to that Moro's room again, and Method's doing a really good job here at the bottom. All these mobs are dying. They've, you know, look, Dark is just pumping damage into this AoE. Perhaps he was standing in that pillar of light. Of course, standing in the light that these stagehands drop on this trash will increase the damage you do significantly.
This map is just poetry for these two teams. When you really do look at it, was saying earlier that Limit and Method NA, they're, in my mind, 2 of the best teams in NA. Obviously, NA, a very, very strong region. I think we have quite a few competitors in this region for the global. You can see Max just getting chunked there for a second and is going to be healed up here. A very big pull coming in from Limit. But these two teams, very different. Method NA going to find their first death here, and it looks like this could just be a full team wipe, and this could be very bad news for them. But what I was trying to get out is these two teams, even though they're both fantastic and really on the same playing field as far as teams go, they're completely different. Method NA is going to do a lot of stuff by the book. They are going to have a lot of dungeons in their pool as well, and that's what you're going to see here. The more traditional pools getting executed, for the most part, flawlessly. Obviously, an error is going to come in there, but they are doing the textbook things very well. Limit has a bunch of secrets. They got a bunch of secrets. They have a bunch of weird pocket strategies. They have weird compositions. They are going to do things their way. Now, ultimately, they have engaged with Morose. Once again, Method NA going to find themselves on the back foot.
So yeah, Method did have a full team wipe there by those flashlights coming out of the ushers in front of the stage area, and now they've got to improvise in the dungeon. The route has been thrown off considerably from last time. They're doing it live. Who knows what they're going to plan now. And Limit, they're doing the exact same run as they did last time. 3 deaths again. This is looking exactly the same out of Limit. This is textbook play from these guys. The consistency is really good, and Method is just slightly less consistent here, and that could have cost them. But they were very fast last time. They should still be able to catch up.
Ushers is definitely a weird place to go down, though, and you can see that's going to have to make them adapt on the fly. Going down on the Ushers is just not something you want to do, not at all, my boo. But you can see Limit is going to be enacting their game plan pretty much how they wanted to. They are engaged on Morose, but you can see inside of that dinner room now is going to be Method NA with an additional 2 deaths, an additional 10 seconds in their back pocket.
Of course, Method is still ahead quite a lot of trash percentage here, but without killing those Ushers, they aren't quite at the trash percentage they'd be at if they had got here normally. Limit's doing the same thing. Morose is on 13%. We see these other 2 mini-bosses still on quite high health. They've, of course, opted to leave them alive. The Morose's dinner guests, they've decided that these guys simply aren't worth their time to kill. They can focus solely on killing Morose. They've got the growths are handled really well by these guys. They're looking really clean, and they're heading over to do the big attunement pool that we saw them do last time.
And we got to assume that is now what Method NA is going to do. You know, if they do get by Morose at this point, they probably go down. They probably go and they deal with that horsey, and then from there, they're going to giddy back on up through that path that we did see from Limit in the first iteration of this dungeon before we had to do the replay, before the bugs did come in. And then from there, they're going to have to kill Maiden and probably have to go about the same pool. They're probably never going to actually run into the Ushers again.
Yeah, so we see like Limit is using the Ring of Peace there to keep these mobs nice and stacked.
Oh!
Max is going down. The problem, of course, with Limit's team is the only battle res they have available is from Max. So this pool is gone. It looked like maybe even preheat popped combustion there, but the pool is over. So now they're coming back with no cooldowns. It's not good.
Oh, man. Yeah, you saw the Purr get popped, and then from there, it is just going to be death for the Death Knight. And now they got to run on back, and this could be the mistake. This mistake, to me, looks like it just put everybody back on even playing field. You're going to have more deaths now on the side of Limit, but they are slightly further progressed. I'm going to assume that the trash is somewhat negligible based off of what we saw from that pool previously from Limit. I think that they have an easier trash pool with their particular composition. They're going to be able to get those leg sweets out. They're going to be able to use combustion, but once again, they're going to go for this very big pool here. You trigger Midnight, but Maximus getting very low here. Is he going to go down? Does pop that AMS just in the nick of time. Now everything is going to be displaced by this Ring of Peace. Big damage. Purgatory going to get popped. Everything into that Gore Fiends. Caught up in the leg sweep, but we see one monk go down. Trill is still going to be up. They got the mage as well. Will this be enough for them to do it? This is going to be quite a few breaks off of the table. Lipmonk going to get battle res here. This pool is so crucial for their success. 10 deaths. Maximus going to go down. He's running back, and this may be another wipe for Limit as they see more and more players fall. That is 14 deaths coming up onto the scoreboard, and all of a sudden, Method NA looking like they have started to thrive here in this dungeon.
You know, that first you don't succeed, try again, but unfortunately, Limit did not succeed twice. Perhaps the third time could be the charm. Method is now doing a very similar pool as them. Hopefully they're not met with as much death as Limit has been met with. They're looking really clean so far. We see a leg sweep go out. Everyone's looking to be quite stable. Everything is looking good for them. JB's still alive. There's no perk proc. There's a lot less threat going on than Limit, who had 2 full team wipes to that trash pool.
Yeah, this is a tough situation to be in if you're Limit. And I'm going to be honest right now. I don't know how they would not tilt off the face of the planet. Hey, look, you've competed before. I'm assuming most people who are watching right now, you've played World of Warcraft before. This is just a situation where you /leave group, you know, it's going to be a very tough situation to be in. All of a sudden, they have 14 deaths on their map pick. And this is one of the best teams in the world. You got to say it. You got to stress it over and over again. this is a tough situation to be in. You have to have a really just an iron stomach to giddy up here, move through, and try to find your footing once again. And they start now just kind of going about the dungeon in a cockamamie manner, not sure exactly what they are trying to do, if they're just trying to get a different trash pool, if they're trying to let things reset. Obviously, they were behind on trash, but now we're going to put our attention on a Method NA for just a little bit here. Only 5 deaths, 79% of their trash out of the way, and they got the Huntsman down. Will they be able to one-phase him? Something that we have seen happen quite a bit today. Need to make sure to get out of that cone as the horse does charge on through.
Yeah, so, there looks like maybe Limit has decided to, none of their cooldowns are available after that last pool, and so what do? Well, let's go do the trash pool of the spiders, and then we'll come back. And now it's the 3rd attempt here on this trash. See the Ring of Peace. We see some good patience. Everyone's line of sighting or getting ready. They're going to go in and pull all that trash, and of course, Method is, the Tombman has remounted. They did not succeed in one-phasing him, so they've got to dodge all of these horses and make sure that they don't get stomped all over. And once they get Midnight low enough, of course, the Tombman has now jumped back off of his horse, and they just have to do the remaining 20% damage. There is another death from Lip out of Limit. This pool is so dangerous. If these, we see tank trinkets being popped, people are trying to stay alive. Looks like they have perhaps managed to clean it up this time, but is it too little too late for these guys?
It's one of those things where they're like, okay, let's get out of the boss room, let's get that reset. They're going to get these last few down. Now they'll probably hard cast the res actually out onto Lip, not going to invest that battle res, but that's 15 deaths. This is going to be a big gap between these two teams as far as just that death counter is concerned, and we can see Method NA already going to be off to the races, going to be moving through here, going to be able to get this big pull. And, this was very much, oh, actually their tank is going to go down, instant battle res. Luckily for them, they already do get that leg sweep out, so they should be able to be just fine here. But this was a story of first map, Limit destroys. Second map, Method destroys, and now we find ourselves in a situation where that 3rd map advantage starts to not work out for Limit. Obviously, this is going to be a replay, and yeah, just everything fell apart on one pull. Now they're going to be working on Midnight, but this is looking like it's going to be Method's NA series, and we talked about just how important this series really is. Both of these teams easily could go to the grand final. They could both easily qualify for that LAN, and they would do a very darn good job of representing the NA region. But at this point, whoever wins this is just going to have such a massive advantage moving forward. They get to stay in that upper bracket. They still have the luxury of losing a little bit later on.
Yeah, of course. So this is still an upper bracket game, so neither of these teams are going to be going home. They will have there will be no more games from these two teams after this today. They'll have a nice long break, and then they'll come back at it tomorrow. Limit, whichever team gets sent to lowest bracket will have a long journey, and the other one could have just 2 or even 3 series that away from being qualified to go to the LAN. Limit has done a really good job, but Method has been just clean enough now where we saw Method was sloppy and then Limit was sloppy, and then it was kind of ping pong who's making the mistakes. But Limit's done a really good job of once all those things happen, just picking yourself back up and doing it again and sticking to your guns. That's what we like to see out of these guys. That takes a lot of heart.
For sure. I mean, it goes to show the volatility of this dungeon, and we are going to see ultimately that will be Grievous that brings him down as they do get the res out onto their tank. But for Limit to actually be able to deal with this pull at all is insane.
Well, perhaps do believe that Emangel's Purgatory had been procced earlier, so perhaps they let him bleed out and die so he would have the Purgatory available for this next big trash pool. Now, this will be 100% kill count for them, and then just one boss stands between them and victory, whereas Limit has a boss as well as a ton of trash percentage remaining and that huge death differential.
So the death differential is really going to be the thing that's probably going to kick their butt. They have about 40 seconds to make up here. This big trash pool, if they do pull it off well, all of a sudden they're going to shoot back up into this as far as trash count is concerned. And if they had a really impressive pull, I mean, the thing is with where we are in the dungeon, a wipe on Method NA could still spell victory for Limit. That wipe is going to mean a massive amount of time to run back, but with these affixes, you don't expect to see a wipe. You do not expect to see a wipe here, especially with Heroism going to be a tool available to Method NA as they start to work on the Maiden of Virtue. As you can see, those consecrations already going to be placed down. Limit's trash pool, though, does not get it all done. They're only going to have 85% here as they do start working on the Maiden of Virtue, and they're going to be trailing by about 25% here. And keep in mind that percentage is going to take a massive pause when that shield, that bulwark, gets placed up by the Maiden of Virtue.
Yeah, so, Limit's looking, they've done much cleaner this time than last time. I believe they had, well, of course, the deaths were from that bug last time, which is why we have remade this series. And, they've played that much cleaner this time. They've gone into the Repentance. We see everyone's got that dot on. JB's working hard to stabilize his team against that Grievous with that dot ticking. Once they get through this bulwark, they kick the Holy Wrath, and then it should be smooth sailing. Just 30% health remains for Method, and then they've secured themselves a spot in the winners' the quarterfinals. They're going to be moving on. There's one more team that's good. We're going to see who they're going to be facing just after this game. Really great job out of these guys. Congratulations to them. Excellently played.
I think this is technically the quarterfinals. The round that they get into is going to be those winter semifinals. So basically, they get themselves one round away from making it to those winter finals and basically ensuring themselves probably the best darn seat in the entire thing. And we can see Method NA going to come out on top here in our remake. And that